Trump presidency seems to be ushering in an unprecedented assault on racial equity and civil rights. But is it really all that unprecedented? What does American history teach us about the enduring, insurmountable nature of systemic racism? And how does understanding that history help us to arm ourselves to resist and do it a different way? Well, I'm so glad you asked because we are talking about it after the break.
Brokers, welcome to another episode of the talk about the unbelievable issues countries trying to keep us poor. Here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Hello, brokers. I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today on Brokish, we are debunking the myth that racism exists, but it is a barrier that we can overcome. Stated by our favorite financial literacy expert, John Hope Bryant.
You know, like John Nope.
I like it. I like it. I like it.
The people be saying stuff, Amber, but anyway. Not me though. I don't call him John Nope.
That was funny. That was funny. I like it. I mean, normally, your jokes don't be landing, but that was a good one.
First of all, it wasn't my joke, to be fair. But you don't even have to act like that. You don't even have to act because I know I'm funny. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today, Amber. I know you was about to ask me what I've been up to and what I've been doing.
I was about to ask you. I was because I got home training and I care.
I know you finna ask me.
How you doing? What you doing?
Girl, I have so many emotions about everything that's going on. I have so many thoughts swirling around my head. And I know some people like, because it's empty in there. Whatever. Y'all can be rude if you want to. But I have all these thoughts swirling around. And I haven't taken the time to actually put pen to paper or really think about them. But I'm going to bring up one. So, the news cycles around this world are, in this nation are very fast. So probably ain't nobody going to care anymore. But I want us to talk a little bit about, before we get started, I want to hear what you got to say about Auntie Tabitha Brown. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Tabitha Brown, and I don't want to misrepresent her bio or her background. Tabitha Brown is, I understand, a native of North Carolina. And decades ago, she and her husband moved to Los Angeles because she always had a dream of being an actress, right? So in that time, she's been in LA. She has been actively trying to build an acting career, which we know can be a very difficult thing to do, right? And in the meantime, people want to point out that her husband was a police officer. So he was there basically supporting the family as a police officer. She was an aspiring actress doing things. And then I think eventually had to start driving for Uber. So she's driving for Uber. And then she is vegan because she had some allergies and health issues and all these things. So she decided to become vegan because she found that was healthier for her and made her feel better. She did one of these viral videos about this Whole Foods sandwich or wrap or something like that.
Correct.
And it went crazy. And that's sort of like how she got picked up. That, and then this combination of, she did a video with her husband and her daughter when TikTok was just sort of starting to come to the fore. And all of these worlds collided, right? And so then she gets this contract with a very popular big brand acting agency. So she gets a contract with them. And then at the same time, because she has this beautiful mane, this beautiful head of hair, people are like, what are you doing for your hair? So she makes hair care products that are sold in some major retailers. At the same time, because she's been doing her vegan cooking things, she has these seasonings. So I think McCormick might have picked up her line. So she sells them.
They have Sunshine.
Look, I got me some Sunshine.
I have some too. I don't like Sunshine, but like the garlic, lemon pepper, and the pepper seasoning. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I got some of it in my pantry. I'm not gonna lie to you. But outside looking in, there are some people who are like, she came out of nowhere. Like many people, if you ask her, she's like, I've been grinding and trying to be an actress and doing all these things for a very long time.
Right.
But the point is, Tabitha hit it on a bunch of different cylinders all at one time, right? So she starts being in things as an actress. She gets like this YouTube show. She's being nominated for awards. I think she's winning certain awards, right?
Mm-hmm.
She gets this placement, a big brand deal in Target. So it's not just her seasoning. She has this Tabitha Brown homeware and all the like cooking stuff and just like
Clothes.
notepads, all the things, right? So she
Yes.
just she was able to, in her words, not my own, retire her husband. So look, he don't have to be a cop no more. He don't have to work for LAPD no more. Because she
Leave
retired.
that man alone.
I am just, I hope, telling the story in a fair and balanced way. Okay. So that's the backstory for anybody that don't know Miss Tabitha Brown. And I will tell you, at the start of the pandemic, my kids and I would watch her videos, and because she's just so endearing. She has a great personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that she talks about being authentically her, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not straightening my hair. I'm not doing these things. I'm giving y'all this North Carolina accent, whether you like
Yep.
it or you don't. So I love all those things, right? And I was happy to see her success, right? Because I felt like she wasn't doing it in any way that was being harmful. It was like, get your money, girl. I'm gonna use your seasoning because I like it and it's all good.
Agreed.
But here where the trouble come for me. So we know that there have been many companies over the recent days and weeks who have been rolling back their DEI policies. Now, I will say I have been having conversations, and this has taken a long time. I'm sorry, Amber, just, forgive me.
No,
And
you
brokers, don't
good.
say nothing. I'm talking. This is our show, so we're going to talk today about this and other things.
Let that baby talk.
Yeah, I'm having a fight, not a fight. I'm having a conversation, a discussion, a dialogue with some of my friends. Everything lives in the group chat. But I do have a friend who specifically works in DEI. And I want to just say, and I think she's a broker, so she might be listening. She might be watching. I just want to say, because I said that in my view, as somebody who has served on DEI committees and works in corporate America and seen those initiatives, that I think DEI is largely performative. And I think in her mind, as somebody who works in DEI, she was like, that's not true. There's so much good work being done. You just can't always see it. And my point is this. I'm not talking about the people who work in the DEI. I'm not saying that the people not doing good work. I'm not saying that the people are trying their hardest. I'm saying that companies give y'all peanuts. And I'm saying if companies gave a damn about DEI, y'all would have more than peanuts. You wouldn't have so many people who are chief diversity officers of organizations that don't have not a nary person on the payroll reporting up to them, right? It's so many chief diversity officers who are individual contributors because for so many companies, DEI is just some bullshit that they write on the paper. So I
Or they
am
have a
not
Happy
talking.
Meal budget.
That's what I'm saying. They
Mhm.
giving y'all the peanuts. And so this is not directed at the people who do the work. And also, I feel like we know DEI is largely performative because they give a lot of DEI work to the employees, like to do like
On
as a
committees.
side hustle on the side of your desk because they don't really care about it. So I want to be very clear when I say that I am not talking about the people. I'm talking about the companies. The companies, in my view, do not, most of them, right? I'm not talking everybody. Most companies do not take DEI seriously. Anyway, the ones who had some of these initiatives on paper, they're rolling them back and they're like, baby, Trump is in office. Trump is anti-DEI, so we don't have to pretend anymore. We don't even have to give y'all the peanuts anymore. So Target is one of those companies I was like, you know what? We're going to roll it back. So we're not really doing things how we used to do things. And so Tabitha Brown is one of the people who came to the internet. And she had a long form video. So in fairness to her, she was saying that people did not watch her long form video. I did. And she said lots of things in her video. But one of the things that stood out to me and probably stood out to a lot of people is this idea that if we don't support Black businesses, then they can't survive, right? And it makes sense. Like, I get it, right? If there are not consumers for products, then those products will not be kept on the shelves. But what I don't get is in the face of and in the wake of what people are suggesting in terms of boycotts. And I'm not going to talk about boycotts and whether or not I think we should or shouldn't. I mean, I think boycotts can be a tool, but they need to be strategic, and people just throwing out the words and that ain't strategic. Anyway, so in the face of what could be boycotts, I think it is irresponsible for you to be like, But if you don't support the Black businesses, then Target is going to put us out, and then we're not going to have no businesses. And I know that's not what y'all want. And honestly, I like Tabitha Brown. Like I said, there I have a lot of things from Target. Like I got some planners from some Black people at Target. Target had all the stuff, right? Right now I got on my Black Santa socks, and I got my Black Santa socks down to the Target. Okay, Target be having a lot of things from a lot of Black people and a lot of Black representational stuff. But Amber, if the people are ultimately thinking about boycotting, you as a Black business owner, you need to boycott as well. You can't say to us, don't boycott because you'll be boycotting me. That's just not how it works in the world of boycotting. I don't want you to be like pulling at my heartstrings, like, but do you want us to get taken off the shelves? Girl, I don't want you to get taken off the shelves. But what kind of solidarity is there if I am going to Target just to buy your stuff? And to be clear, Tabitha does not have anything that I need. And that's the thing that Target does in terms of the crumbs. Target will sell us Black Santa socks and Black planners and other things that we don't need. So at the end of the day, I don't have to support you down to the Target because you're not even giving me nothing that I can't get nowhere. Like, not that I can't get anywhere else. You're not giving me anything that's critical to my mission.
Yes, I agree with that. I think Tabitha needed some help with her messaging though. And I will say I didn't watch the long form video. So I just saw clips. But here's where my solidarity with Tabitha is, because I feel like white people are very good at scapegoating Black people, right? So now that we've started talking about
For sure.
boycotts and talking about all of these things, these Black brands have emerged at the forefront, right? Of this is what this is about. And I hate that because I feel like we get the worst of every hand.
Always.
So I feel like what her messaging should have been tailored to was forcing people to think introspectively about why we're even centering Black people in this conversation. Because if we're talking about boycotting, period, presumably what we should be talking about is the impact it would have on white capitalists, right? And so how people like Tabitha Brown emerge at the forefront of the conversation. And I get it, because what she's saying is, well, if you boycott Target, you boycott
me.
I understand that, but I felt like what it really did was it made this about us when it ain't really about us. And it just gave off the air that we were missing the forest for the trees a little bit. And so
even so, though, what it unveils is that Black capitalism is not going to save us.
No,
right?
Black capitalism is capitalism. Yes.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
even though I agree with you wholeheartedly that Black people are always at the front lines and don't need to be at the front lines, the point is, who is she in solidarity with? Baby, you in
Yes.
solidarity with Target, or you in solidarity with us? And so that's
Yes.
when I have to be like, looks like a class traitor to me. I don't know. And I'm using Tabitha as sort of an archetype, right? I'm not using
Right.
her as like me pointing a finger to her. Again, got the lady seasoning. She don't do nothing to me.
She has made herself the face of Black capitalism. I get it completely. What I'm saying though is, why, first of all, some of this is we need to be more educated, which is a banner of this episode. Like some of this is just not going to come to us easily, because I don't even know how Target became, public enemy number one. Like, because if I'm going to boycott, I feel like there's a list of people that
100%.
should be higher. Amazon, Walmart, Sam's Club. Like, I feel like sometimes we fall for the okie doke and we be looking left when we need to be looking right. And so
that's what I mean about it's not even strategic.
correct.
Because again, and not to be that person, but to your point about, well, to the point about strategy and boycotting and all of that, right? What we want to do is we want to find alternatives, but that ain't what boycotting is about, right? Like, boycotting is about sacrifice.
Removing the capital from the system. It is
It is
about
about a sacrifice. So we want to be like, I'm not shopping at Target. I'm gonna shop at Walmart. You talking about the same Walmart that got so many people that's on food stamps down to the Walmart working there full time and still getting a food stamp check? Them Walmart, that
that
Walmart. You
is the
talking about
largest private
Amazon?
employer. Yes.
You talking about Amazon, who owns Amazon Web Services that runs the entire internet? How do you decouple yourself from Amazon? Right? You're
People
talking
pissing in
about,
bottles while they packing your boxes because they cannot go to the bathroom while they're on the clock without facing retaliation from the employer.
yes.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, if we understood that capitalism is a world system and how well integrated we are in it, then we would have to really stop and think, wow, if we're going to boycott, we really have to be strategic about this. We can't just be like, I'm not shopping down to the Walmart, because that's not that's not how it works. And it especially doesn't work like that with us being the percentage of the population that we are, with capitalism being as all together as it is. Like, it's just not gonna make sense. So I'm not anti-Tabitha, I'm not anti-boycott, but I'm like, we got to be real, we got to be real, and boycotting requires sacrifice.
So that is basically in a nutshell what we're talking about today. Like the wildness of the proposition, like racism exists, but it's not a barrier you can't overcome because these systems work in tandem together. And so when you consider the idea that we are all entrenched in a capitalist system that fuels the white supremacy, and the government is made to work in tandem with the white supremacy and to fuel the white supremacy. And so then you have all of these things playing on each other. It is not a barrier you can overcome. You either have to reconstruct it, which is what for a brief moment in history we tried to do, or you have to exist within it. Those are the only two options. You either have to exist entrenched in the system, or you have to reconstruct the system. It
I
is
was
not
lighting
a
my match. Did you see me light my match?
yes, burn it down. Yes, that was a sound effect that I got. I did understand that one. And so, I mean, that's basically what we are talking about today in a nutshell.
Yeah, and Amber, it's so interesting to me because I do feel, sometimes I feel like, we've been having so many of these conversations, especially if I'm looking to this conversation about capitalism, right? Like, people been telling us about capitalism and class traders and everything else since the 1800s, but we still here having these conversations. So I am excited for us to talk about history and what history can hopefully teach us, even though I'm not convinced.
Yeah, well, one of the first lessons is that history teaches us that one of the main problems is that people don't know their class. So America is a really good marketer because you got a lot of people playing the hand that they were not dealt. And so you playing the dealer's hand and you're not playing your own hand. And so you have a lot of people really grossly mistaken about what class they're in. And they thinking because they make good money, they have a house, that they are middle class. But most folks who buy into the myth of middle class are really working class people. And most people who think they are wealthy or who have obtained some modicum of financial security are really lower middle class, right? But most folks in America are working class. Even people who are making six figures, high six figures, $300,000-$400,000 a year. Don't get it twisted. You're not middle class. You're working class because you got to take your ass to work to hold what you got.
And these $10 eggs y'all finna find. I don't eat eggs, but these $10 eggs y'all finna find finna show a lot of people what the real is.
Baby, I wish I could find some $10 eggs. I took myself down to the Asian grocery store the other day to get me some eggs while I was waiting for my pizza at Little Caesars because the Asian grocery store was right across the street. And I got 18 eggs, and that man said $14. And I said, United States dollars? He said, yes, ma'am. The eggs are $13.99 for 18 eggs.
But you got 18 though, Amber. So Your eggs haven't gotten up to
$13.99.
$10 yet. They still we talking about a dozen eggs. Everybody don't have 19 children. Most people get the dozen. Yeah.
That still hurt my
Yeah.
feelings. I paid
That's what I'm
$15 for some
saying.
eggs.
But
Okay.
so and just background on sort of how this Amber and I were talking about we were talking about all the things that Trump is doing, right? Like you get up every day and every day there's a new headline. And every day it's like I don't know. And I feel like he and his team are working 24/7 on it, right? Like every day it's like, what's the thing that we can take away today? So one of the headlines from today is this idea that if the government granted you some money. So I have one of my good friends actually got a presidential award, but it was like given under President Biden, right? And the presidential award and her organization is supposed to get $10,000. And today Trump executive ordered that thing, and he was like, all these grants, in some places people are talking about SNAP benefits and all these things, anything to individuals, all these like groups, we're shutting that down until we can review it. And I wish I had the headline because the person from the organization who issued the statement was talking about like they didn't want to have like this Marxian leap towards DEI is kind of essentially what he was saying. But every day there's a new thing. And so we were talking about like, historically there have to be some precedent, right? Like if we go back to Reconstruction and those sorts of things. So that's really what today is about. What are the historical parallels to what we're seeing in a second Trump presidency? And like, is history telling us that the shit ain't even new?
No, it's not. And because I remember you said to me, you were like, oh, isn't this the largest mass pardon in history? And I was like, no. And you were like, really? What's the other one? And I was like, when Andrew Johnson pardoned the Confederates. This has happened before. And I remember I told you this morning because you was like, bitch, with a script. Y'all know she's abusive towards me in private too. And so I was like, well, Massa, I'm not done with it yet because I went down this rabbit hole this morning reading about Andrew Johnson. And I feel like Project 2025 is straight out of the Obstruct Reconstruction handbook. And it is so interesting to see that what we are witnessing right now is almost play for play mirroring what we saw with Andrew Johnson. And like Trump, he was impeached as well. And he was impeached for obstructing the government, trying to interfere with stop Reconstruction. And it was not successful. And so one of the things that you have to think about when you sort of draw these parallels and you look at somebody like a Richard Nixon or Bill Clinton, who were called to the carpet about these very clear moral failings, why the government was effective at stopping them, but not people like Trump and Andrew Johnson, because it would seem like obstructing the government would be
a bigger deal.
Yes, a bigger deal, or just as severe as breaking into a office building to try to get a leg up on your opponents, or
Letting somebody sing on your mic.
Yes, abusing your power with the intern in the White House. And so I think when you sort of take a critical lens to why doesn't the checks and balances we have in place work with people like Andrew Johnson and Donald Trump, but they work with somebody like a Nixon or a Clinton? I think you can only come to one conclusion, and that's because this government was built to enable white supremacy, not obstruct it.
For sure.
And so when the issue at the front and the center is a moral failing or an obstructionist behavior that is rooted in white supremacy, this government is not designed to stop that. This government is fueled off of that. And so it is very interesting to look at Trump, who comes in and sort of works as a chaos agent to confuse a lot of things, really in an effort to undo civil rights, right? And to undo the bedrock laws that have been used in this country to cement desegregation. And it's the same thing Andrew Johnson did.
Tell us what he did, Amber.
So y'all know that Abraham Lincoln, went down to the Cinemark in the 1860s, and he got himself shot while he was at the Cinemark watching the movies. And so Andrew Johnson, who was an uneducated white man, I'll just leave it there. He was an uneducated white man. He was a career tailor. He altered clothes, so he had no formal education. He was not a wealthy man. He was from Tennessee. He had risen through the ranks politically. He served as the governor of Tennessee, but other than that, he was pretty much, he kind of came out of nowhere. But he ascends to the office of the presidency, and almost immediately he makes the centerpiece of his tenure, creating a unity back in the government. The problem is that the Confederates had lost the Civil War, but they were still Confederates. They still had the same agenda. And so, very logically, people from the North were like, okay, well, we don't have a problem with reunification, but perhaps we should set some guardrails in place before we reunite with people who literally committed treason to ensure that the treason is over. So there was going to be federal oversight of the Southern state governments, right? There was going to be federal oversight of the elections. There was going to be guardrails around who from those states could become representatives in the government, right? Because perhaps it would be a bad idea to send treason, people who are traitors, who had committed treason to the Senate or to the House of the Representatives, especially if they were unrepentant. And so the North wanted to require things like a loyalty oath, to require people to disavow their allegiance to the Confederacy. And Andrew Johnson said, kumbaya, we're not doing all of that. I'm going to pardon them, and I am going to do something else as well. So not only am I going to pardon them for all their sins and pretend like they literally didn't try to overthrow the government. Sound familiar? I am going to roll back Special Field Order number 15, which was the order that came out of the Freedmen's Bureau that had given the land of Confederate enslavers to the formerly enslaved Black people. That's where we get the term we commonly call 40 acres and a mule. So a lot of land, particularly in the Southeast, have been redistributed to Black formerly enslaved people to work that land. Just kind of wild to give people who have been enslaved for centuries reparations, right? And to require people who had committed treason to give up their wealth.
Not even go to jail.
Not even go to jail, but just to give up their wealth. Well, Johnson rescinded that. Special Field Order 15 was rescinded. And so the South, with the backing of the federal government, went back and took land from Black people, some of whom had taken out loans and took the money that they had to buy seed, to buy farm equipment, to invest in that land. It was taken from them and summarily given back to the white Confederate landowners.
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you mean to tell me that just like with the Freedmen's Bank, we talked to Dr. Justine Hill Edwards, and it was the whites and the Freedmen's Bank that caused it to fail, because instead of giving the money to the Negroes, we gave the money to the whites. Are you saying to me today that also in the same way that we said we are going to pardon them for their sins, they are no longer Confederates, their hearts have been changed, and to reward them for changed hearts, we're going to give them land that was meant for the people who have been working it for free for hundreds of years? Did I get that right?
Okay. Not only did you get that right, but that also was a humongous advantage to white Southern landowners, because that decision also
free land
ushered in sharecropping, because what then happened for a lot of Black people who had become tied to that land, once they were divested of ownership, they basically made 360. They made 360 deals with the people who had previously enslaved them, who said, well, since you have no legal right to the land anymore, since I have no requirement to reimburse you for whatever improvements you made to the land or whatever plants you might have planted, you have no legal entitlement to the crop when it's time to harvest it. What you can do is you can stay here and work for me.
And you're
and
welcome.
and I'll keep the books. I'll provide you with a place to live. And once the crops come in, well, you'll come see me and sit down with absolutely no rights and no transparency about the process. And I'll tell you
How
if
much I can
I
give
owe
you?
you money or not, based on what you've produced and what I say you produce. And so this literally not only ushered in the injustice of sharecropping, but it also emboldened the Southern Confederates to create literally overnight an obstruction to Reconstruction by ushering in de jure segregation. Because all they did was basically say, all right, well, we can't do it on the federal level, but we will codify white supremacy on the state level. South Carolina, literally, there is a record of it. In the legislator said, we are going to make white supremacy the law in South Carolina.
So,
So,
Amber, but John Hope Bryant told us that he said that he taught us that racism is a thing, it's a problem, but he told us that we could overcome it. And
yes,
so why didn't these Black people, they were free, right? So they were free to do what they wanted to do. The Like you said, the government put on the books that they actually had some rights as citizens. Like these were all things that were available to them. So why didn't they stop this from happening? Like why did they
yeah.
just let why did they just let these folks do it?
So it's so funny that you
Why did
say
they
that
overcome
because
racism?
long before DEI was the buzzword, the big issue around reverse discrimination centered on the 14th Amendment. And so Andrew Johnson opposed the 14th Amendment. He opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1877 because what he said was that gave Black people unfair privileges in discrimination against white people. And so I'm telling y'all, this
This stuff
playbook,
sound the same. It's the
it's
same.
the tale as old as time. And so fortunately, the Republican Congress was still able to pass the Civil Rights Acts and to get the 14th Amendment ratified over vetoes and over the objections of Andrew Johnson because Nebraska was admitted to the Union and they ratified the 14th Amendment. But one of the things that bothered Southerners about the 14th Amendment is that they wanted language in there where it talked about persons, all persons being born in the United States. They had no issue with Black people being free, right? They didn't have a problem with that. But they had an issue with
Well,
Black people. Well, they were willing to deal with that. Like,
concede that
yes,
point.
yes, yes. They were willing to concede the point that slavery as a formal institution was over. But they resented the fact that Black people were going to be given rights as citizens, and that even because they did not want the Black people to become citizens of the United States. And then for the Republican control, the Reconstruction Congress to say, fine, we won't even fight that. We won't even talk about making them citizens. We'll just change the language in the amendment to say all persons, right? Whether they're a citizen or not, because that's really the power of the 14th Amendment. You don't have to be a citizen to claim the protection. And they were just undone by that, undone by the fact that the Reconstruction Congress circumvented the power of citizenship to try to give Black people rights and protections, even though the South was doing a great job of blocking them from having formal citizenship. And so that was another thing that came up during that time as well. Andrew Johnson opposed DC statehood because that also came up in tandem with the 14th Amendment. And so, surprise, surprise, I wonder why Southerners might not have wanted DC to become a state. It's probably related to the same reason people don't want DC to be a state now, right? It's also the same reason why they didn't want Nebraska to be a state, because they knew it would just be additional votes in support of the 14th Amendment. But yeah, um, that is exactly what happened. You had a pardon that was given en masse. And even when the 14th Amendment passed, all it did was embolden the South to go back and go full throttle with de jure segregation. So that's literally the birth of Jim Crow, is the ratifying of the 14th Amendment. And Andrew Johnson did everything he could to obstruct it. He tried to get rid of the Secretary of War, who supported the Freedmen's Bureau. Congress reauthorized the Freedmen's Bureau after it was supposed to sunset. I believe it was 1876 the sunset was supposed to happen, but they had reauthorized it and Johnson vetoed it. And they didn't have enough votes to override that. So the Freedmen's Bureau did end up sunsetting. But I mean, he just literally made it his business. His platform was undermining Reconstruction. That was his entire platform. He had no vision for the government other than to stop Reconstruction from occurring. So much so that he violated the Office and Tenure Act, which led to him getting impeached. And then the impeachment was unsuccessful because he won by one vote.
The removal from office was unsuccessful.
The removal from office was unsuccessful by one vote. Yeah.
So, Amber, again, I'm thinking about our ancestors, and I'm thinking about them getting over these hurdles, right? Like,
Yes.
we know racism exists, racism is real, and consistently they're having to jump over these hurdles. But the hurdles didn't stop being erected, right, after the period of Reconstruction was over, right? So, because we know that after the period of Reconstruction and us moving into Jim Crow, what we end up is with a very, at the time, I'll say even vibrant civil rights movement, right? Where we were able to make strides as a nation, as a community, right? To be able to claw back some of what we lost.
Yeah.
So my question is, Andrew Johnson is not our only exemplar of trying to take away the rights that we had during his tenure as president. So who are maybe some more modern day exemplars that we can point to?
Yeah. So even if you look at what happened as we see the rise of the progressive era, so very accidentally during World War One, well, not accidental for white people, but accidental for Black people, you sort of have an emergence of a middle class during the progressive era, which is what the sort of the benchmark of progressivism is you have a middle class emerging to kind of close the gap created by the Gilded Age, right? And so very accidentally, you have Black people being able to partake in that on the fringes because the war created deficits that for a moment suspended the intensity of racism because they just needed bodies to do certain jobs. So you have Black people having access very accidentally to some good jobs during World War One because a lot of white people were fighting in the war. And so as a result, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, because we talk about class traders. So we have Black people who are comfortable and doing good. And the Democrats, Woodrow Wilson particularly, starts courting these Black people as voters, which was unthinkable just like 50 years before that, right? That Black people would vote Democratic.
Democrat, right.
And somehow Woodrow Wilson manages to do what nobody thinks could be done at the time. And he sort of fashions himself as a progressive, as a moderate. I mean, he's educated. He was the president of Princeton. So he has this East Coast legitimacy that washes the polite racism off of him, right? He's not a Southern man. And Black people vote en masse for Woodrow Wilson, vote heavily Democratic, really for the first time since the Civil War ends. And Woodrow Wilson gets into the White House and promptly repays us by resegregating the government. particularly the post office, which had been a place where Black people had been able to make strides in employment, where Black people had been able, particularly in Washington, D.C., to create wealth. They had been able to buy homes. You had areas around Howard University and LaDroit where Black people were doing well. And that was largely due to government employment.
I
And
have a
so,
question, teacher. I have a question, teacher.
mhm,
Are are you saying, because Woodrow Wilson, I'm going to imagine, I don't know, you'll have to tell me. I'm going to imagine that his outreach to Black America included Black Americans,
yes,
right? And so is it fair to say that, we had a lot of the same people that we have now who were happy to sell us out for what it might get for them, right? So, and I don't know if he did. So this is a question, I don't know if you know, but like, I know he did some other things, but did he at least offer like some cabinet positions to these people? Did he offer the individual people who helped, who traded their race for his votes?
I don't recall there being any notable Black people in his cabinet, but yes, I mean, this is so we're talking about like 1913, and so like 1913, 1919. And so I mean, the NAACP supported Woodrow Wilson. um a lot of Black people assumed that because of the position that Wilson took with respect to World War I, because y'all know, Woodrow Wilson, the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations, he that's kind of where he goes down in history as the father of the League of Nations. People assumed that because he took that position with respect to World War I, that also was a reflection of his view about unity within the United States. And that was a lie. Wilson knew that numerically there was not enough Black people who voted in the United States to replace the support that the Democratic Party had in the South, and that he was going to unleash a chasm within the party if he didn't throw them a bone. And so, what he did to show that he was still about that life was he allowed them to push through resegregation in the federal government for the first time since before Reconstruction. And he didn't say a word about it. And what is so funny, because the Washington race riots of 1919, that's why, y'all, when people sat up in 2021 after them white people stormed the Capitol and said this was unprecedented, this was unprecedented, I was like, really? Do y'all not read? Because the only thing that's unprecedented about this is that this is the first time
It was
white
on video.
people have attacked other white people. That's really the only thing unprecedented about it, is that white people were placed in danger by it. But the Washington race riots in 1919 was led by servicemen in the United States military who were upset because they believed that a Black man had raped a white serviceman's wife. And I will tell you that it was the Washington Post doing the dirty work of gentrifiers, putting out all these false stories about Black men being rapists when they knew it wasn't true, because they were trying to push gentrification. They wanted to take the land around LaDroit, around Howard University. They wanted those Black people's land. So anyway, they accused the Black man of raping a serviceman's wife. And for like 4 days, these military men stormed DC, and they just unleashed all types of lawless violence against Black people, against property. And Woodrow Wilson sat in the White House for 4 days. That's 96 hours. And he watched it. And the only reason that the riot ended was he sent 2,000 troops. But do you know what stopped the riot? It wasn't the troops. It started raining in DC. It was like a torrential flood. Like, the rain literally forced the riots to stop. And then once it started raining, Woodrow Wilson sent 2,000 troops. But so many Black people died. So many Black people's homes got destroyed. So much damage was done to the District of Columbia. And so that's why I remember just being so infuriated in 2021, hearing people talk about this being unprecedented. White violence
Oh,
at the
heck
seat of
no, that's not.
Capitol is not unprecedented. It had happened before. The only thing that was different this time is that there were white people who were in danger. And so I think what we need to remember is A, um, the government will always sell us out when it's convenient, right? And this
And
whole
even when it's not.
vote or die vote, like I hate that history has not taught us that our allegiance cannot be to no party, because numerically they will always decide that there's just not enough of us for us to matter when it comes to selling out white people or selling out black people. We will always lose that choice. We will always lose that choice. And the government was segregated again. I want to say until the 30s. It was like almost 2 decades, almost 20 years of resegregation after Woodrow Wilson.
But Amber, you still, I was talking about civil rights. You ain't even got us to the civil rights period of who done sold us out. You still talking about
No.
Woodrow Wilson. Well, who else? What other presidents?
Well, here's the thing about civil rights. I mean, obviously, we know that the unsung civil rights champion is the white gentleman from Texas, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Surprise, surprise, shocker, shocker. So
Everybody's favorite racist president is
everybody's
LBJ.
favorite racist president.
It's
Okay,
LBJ.
so we get the Civil Rights Act of
He'll
19.
call you a nigga and he'll sign the Civil Rights Act at the
Okay,
same time.
at the same damn time. But you know what? Call me a nigga and sign it instead of call me a nigga and don't sign it. I'll take that.
Totally.
I'll take that. So we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but I want y'all to know that we're still playing the same game. What is happening right now is about what happened 5 years before 1964, and that was Brown versus Board of Education. So since Brown versus Board of Education, the modern Republican Party's goal has been to find a way to undo that landmark Supreme case. Because out of that case, you have a progeny or a lineage of cases that basically say that anything that touches and concerns on commerce, right, is in the purview of the federal government. And so if it touches and concerns on commerce, then the government can regulate it. And that was the first way that the government regulated segregation. And that was through Boynton versus Virginia, when the government desegregated bus terminals, because it said that interstate bus travel is relevant to the Interstate Commerce Clause. And as a result, the government has a right federally to regulate it. And so then after Boynton, we get Brown. And so in the modern era, Republicans have been trying to undo that because that was the heartbreak of the South. Brown versus Board of Education was a unanimous Supreme Court decision. It was 9-0. And from that, you had decisions that outlawed bans against sodomy, right? You had the decision that ultimately
Y'all don't
outlawed
have nothing else to do but bans like
ban sodomy. And to Texas, because this happened in Texas, the police set up a raid to catch the man and his boo in the act, to arrest them, and videotaped it so they could play it in court. Can you imagine being that pressed over somebody else's booty? Because I can't. Okay. So out of that comes the cases that outlaw bans on sodomy, that outlaw bans on same-sex marriage, and Roe versus Wade. Well, by the time we get to the 80s, it is no longer passe to be an open racist, right? You want to be a polite racist. So now we don't say nigger anymore. We say Negro. And we don't talk about Black people. We talk about welfare queens, and we talk about super predators. And we talk about drug lords and the people who are terrorizing our community. Thugs, yes. So we're not talking about Black people, right? But we know what we're talking about. And something very dangerous happened that threatened the Republican coalition. During that time, the Supreme Court made a ruling that you could not be a nonprofit or a tax exempt organization if you had any segregation. And
What will happen with the churches?
that, so boom, boom. So you had people like Bob Jones University, had people like Liberty University and Jerry Falwell.
Not
You,
Liberty.
yes, you had these organizations where they believed, and even, I mean, if we telling the truth, Billy Graham preached segregation is God's will too. I mean, don't tell your favorite black pastors who like to quote him and pay for his daughters and his children to come to y'all's churches.
Oh,
But Billy Graham, he repented later in life, but I mean,
his kids didn't. They still on the train.
his hermeneutic was rooted in segregation too. And so you had churches who were afraid that if they preached open segregation, that they would lose their tax exempt status. And so then the question became, how do we have our cake and eat it too?
Mm-hmm.
How do we code this language? How do we keep segregation? And how do we put people in office that will make sure that we can still hold on to our power? And that is where the modern pro-life movement comes in. Pro-life politics is where white Christians hide their racism. Because somebody, and listen, I give props where props is due. It's a genius strategy that the same conservative farts that are anti segregation are also anti-women. So if you just talk about abortion, you'll get the same result, which is why Trump, who everybody identified as pro-choice almost his entire adult life, morphed into a pro-life Republican when he ran for office.
But don't jump to Trump though. You was somewhere. You was in the 1970s.
Okay. No. Okay, no. I'm just telling you that's why we're in the Reagan era now.
Right.
So
Bring us in.
So what is happening now is they very quietly start putting this plan in place. That's the precursor to Project 2025. So then you have cases like Milliken v. Bradley, which basically, for all intents and purposes, gutted Brown versus Board versus education, because Milliken v. Bradley declared the busing program in Detroit to be unconstitutional. Because that's the thing about Supreme Court cases. They tell you what you can and can't do, but they don't tell you how to do it. So the Supreme Court tells us in 1959 that segregation is inherently unequal and a violation of the 14th Amendment, but it doesn't tell the states how to remediate it. So how do you fix it, right? So now everybody's trying to figure out, how do you fix it? So what's the solution on the table? Well, great. We'll bust the children. We'll take the Negro children to the white side and we'll take the white children to the black side. And then, of course, as you can imagine, that went nowhere because the white people wasn't having that. They didn't want us in their schools. And so during the 70s and 80s, you have an all-out attack on Brown versus Board on the state level. And this is the first time that you see Republicans organizing around how to craft test cases. They literally start playing the civil rights handbook against us. They literally use the Charles Hamilton Houston playbook and they start setting up their own test cases. And do y'all remember when Reagan put Sandra Day O'Connor on the bench and the white people lost their mind because she was pro-choice and she was a woman? And the white Christians said, we've been giving our support to this bonkers actor from California who got Alzheimer's and his wife got a gay seamstress, and we turn our head to act like we don't know that he's a phony baloney, like Donald Trump, right? A fake Republican. But then you're going to repay us by putting Sandra Day O'Connor on the Supreme Court. So what does Reagan do? He says, I got you. I'm going to do that again. So then what do we get? We get William Rehnquist, right? Who would eventually become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And William Rehnquist becomes really Clarence Thomas before Clarence Thomas. He is like, except he's white, so he's not a race traitor, but he is the deep conservative eyes and ears on the court. He is the one who authored the opinion in Milliken versus Bradley. He is the one who is really leading the architecture of how to gut Brown versus Board of Education. And he also is instrumental in shaping what a pro-life legal jurisprudence looked like. Because really in this country, we didn't have anything around that. Abortion had never really been a humongous issue, right? And we know that not even in the church, because the Southern Baptists paid for women to have abortions even into the 80s. Women who were raped, women who were victims of incest and horrible crimes. The Southern Baptists paid for women to have abortions across this country. That is documented. And so really, William Rehnquist sort of takes the charge with people like Paul Weyrich, and they create this pro-life ethos that they tuck the animus for the Civil Rights Acts and for Brown versus Board of Education in. And they know that if they can promote that, then they can get the same result without ever having to talk about Black people. And so that's how you get the moral majority. That's how you get the family values movement during Clinton. That's why Clinton, being a piece of garbage, sleeping with interns, was such a gift to Republicans, because it turned the whole nation into a family values debate. And it allowed pro-life politics to grow feet and legitimacy in the face of a president that had a very clear moral failing. Now, granted, we wasn't talking about it for the right reason.
And wait, to be clear, and I know this point doesn't matter, but we are not going to call what Clinton did. I'm not going to call it a moral failing.
Abusing your power with an intern
no,
is a
what
moral
I'm
failing.
No. What I'm saying is, to me, it's better if we call it an abuse of power
with
an intern as opposed to a moral failing. I don't care who suck your dick. I really don't care. That's not the point in Clinton's situation.
And the moral failing was not adultery.
She was too young.
Yes.
She was too young and under his tutelage and care almost.
She could not meaningfully consent to engage in a relationship with the leader of the United States of America,
essentially,
as an intern in the White House at 21. So yes, you're right. While the world was framing it as an affair, that was the moral failing. What the issue was is, yes, he was abusing his power and taking advantage of a vulnerable young woman who had no way to equally engage in that type of relationship. It just couldn't happen. But yeah, what it did was it really recast and legitimized pro-life politics. And it took the conversation about segregation almost completely off the table. And so while everybody was looking at pro-life politics and overturning Roe versus Wade, because do you know what Supreme Court case forms the bedrock of the legal reasoning in Roe versus Wade? Brown versus Board of Education. It is a part of Brown's progeny. It basically, like, it's a daughter case. Mm-hmm. And so everybody focused their attention on undoing Roe versus Wade, because if Roe fell, what would obviously be called into question? Brown versus Board of Education. And so that is why we saw also other things being tucked in that really were coded anti-Blackness over the preceding years during Bush 1 and 2, and even during Obama, defunding public schools, charter schools. You had also a very
school choice. That's what they told. That's school choice.
Yes. But why do you think these people want school choice?
I will give it to them. They are great at marketing. Like, even the idea of states' rights, right? Like, it's not about slavery, it's about states' rights, in the same way that school choice is totally about racism. But we just call it school choice. I'm a parent. I just want what's best for my kid. Why don't you want me to choose?
Yes.
They are great at the marketing.
Yes. And so now we have basically subsidized, separated by race, religious schools being paid for by the government.
In a country where there's separation of church and state.
Right. And so what I want to be clear about is why that gets us to where we are today is because they are now using DEI to do the same bait and switch. They are tucking it in because, let's be clear, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not interchangeable with civil rights. It's not
Or
the
affirmative
same,
action, to be clear.
or affirmative action. It is not the same thing at all, right? So the civil rights laws that we have in our country are codified to create protections for all people regardless of race. It does not create race-based advantage. It creates legal protection for all people regardless of race, protecting fundamental rights like the right to vote, the right to be able to rent a house or rent an apartment without discrimination, the right to be able to get a job in the federal government without your race being used against you. So those are distinct things from how do we create environments? Well, once people are here, they are able to flourish. That is the question that DEI asks, is how do we create environments where now that we have different types of people, all the people are able to be included and flourish in the environment. That's a completely different analysis. And so the fact that they are now creating all of this hoopla about undoing DEI, what they are really undoing is desegregation and civil rights protection. And they are calling it DEI to confuse people about what's happening and to have people talking about shit that don't matter, like the merits of DEI. The government has never had DEI. Even when the government had equity and inclusion training, those trainings were really based on the enforcement of the Civil Rights Act and remediating the racism that had been historically present in the government. And so those trainings were not, here's how you take a Black person and give them an advantage, or here's how you, it was not that at all. But we're talking about that while they are trying to quietly undo desegregation. And I also want y'all to know they have said the quiet part out loud because
They've been saying, Amber,
well, I want you to know that it's in writing, because in the case, oh my gosh, I just went blank. I was about to call the name of the case that undid Roe. Clarence Thomas, speaking of race traitors, Clarence Thomas openly questioned in his concurring opinion the legitimacy of Brown versus Board of Education. He openly questioned.
He openly who now what?
He openly questioned the legitimacy of Brown versus Board of Education in the decision overturning Roe versus Wade. So I just want y'all to know, okay? We need to quit falling for the banana in the tailpipe, because we've seen what happens here. We had one chance in Reconstruction. That's the closest we ever came in this country to burning it down and doing it over, where we were creating systems and structures that were really rooted in equal justice for all. And what we decided when we had a leader that was no longer on that playing field is that we were going to pretend like it didn't happen, welcome back the people who tried to destroy this government, and give them free range to create segregated states and say, well, that's their right in the state. We'll do what we can at the federal government level.
And isn't this the world we living in today? Ain't this the world we living in today? And if it's not from Trump going to on a bi-coastal tour from Florida to California saying, y'all don't need FEMA. Y'all need to let California and Florida figure this thing out. You don't want the government in your business trying to help you through this disaster. I mean, that's why when people talk like John Hope Bryant, Amber, it is so frustrating, because it's like, if you had any historical knowledge, you would understand that we have seen this all before, and every time we jump back over it. So don't get us wrong. We finna jump, right? We finna try to figure it out. but they keep coming back, stripping things away. Like every
Yes.
time they also come back to strip things away.
And making people believe that they have hope for escaping out of it by what amount of money they have in their bank account
With financial literacy.
is actually a ludicrous proposition. It is actually a ludicrous proposition. And I think that one of the things we suffer from, and when I say we, I mean people who are vulnerable in the system, is that we are not taught to recognize the game. And so when this stuff happens, we do not see it as a part of a broader pattern. We see Trump as an anomaly. We see Trump as a um a unique character because we have sat in school and been indoctrinated about Ronald Reagan and about Woodrow Wilson being the father of peace and about George Bush saving this country in 9/11. And so we do not recognize that this man is literally an extension of all of them. He's just stupid.
Well, he's not stupid because you know what I do believe? I believe Trump is reading the history books, and I believe Trump knows. I don't think any of this is a secret to him. I could be wrong.
I don't think he's a learned man at all. I've heard that like they basically had to start like putting the presidential briefings in like YouTube format because he refused to read. But I believe that he is very aware of where he's positioned in the system, and he plays his cards right. So I mean, hey, you don't have to be smart if you have enough sense to know where you stand. Because I firmly believe he hates being president, but he didn't want to go back to jail, so he ran again. He does not. I mean, I don't believe he has any interest in this government in being a political
Except for how much
person at
it
all.
can enrich him personally.
That's exactly right. This is all about, I mean, this is Yellowstone. This is literally John Dutton becoming mayor to keep his ranch. Literally.
I ain't seen it.
Oh, dang. Girl, you need to watch Yellowstone.
But Amber, you didn't keep the people a long time today. See, y'all know how Amber always talking about me, like, oh my God, Erika, you're always doing too much. Da, da, da. And if I didn't stop it now, she keep going another 20 minutes. I'm saying Amber over here, she
talked about Tabitha Brown for 30 minutes. And that lady said that it was me. But that's all right. I'll take it. But because y'all need to know, quit getting on the internet talking to Tabitha Brown, because that ain't it. That ain't it. That ain't it.
It's not like we said, Amber. That is not it. That is just a representation of one of the bigger problems that we have. She is. And so I do want to be clear. This is not me saying anything against her.
Yeah, no, right? I get it.
This is how certain Black people, Black capitalists, fall prey to elite capture, and they are leveraged by this bigger system to help quell any sort of uprising or organizing that regular everyday Black people can do. And that's how people like her get used to get on the internet and say, maybe still buy my stuff.
Yes. I just want y'all to be clear, though, that the end goal is for our Black asses to be back at the back of the bus. I just want you to be clear.
Their end goal for us is for us.
Yes, that is the end goal, for our Black asses to be back in the back of the bus. Legally, not by custom, legally, de jure, okay?
I don't even know if they want to be on the bus with I don't think they.
Now, come on, now you're right, because listen. The second thing they did after sharecropping was, like, in places like Mississippi and Alabama, they literally created laws where before we was on the back of the bus, they were like actually separate buses.
Right.
Separate buses.
Like we need separate swimming pools. We need separate universities. We need, like, what?
You're not wrong, but I just want y'all to know that that's the end goal. So while y'all talking about DEI, while we talking about all of that, at least if you're going to have the conversation, because I don't believe in telling grown people what to do, just know that is not the goal. The goal is not to un-DEI. The goal is to un-civil rights. Yes. That's the goal. Okay?
Yeah.
Speak clear.
Well, Amber, do you have homework today?
Yes. So actually what I'm going to do is, in the receipts, I'm just going to post some brief reading. And I just want to encourage everybody to do it. Now, I ain't gonna do a
What?
reading trick. I ain't gonna do a pop quiz. But I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to just read some documents. So I'm
Why
gonna
you
post
didn't send
some.
me the reading list, Amber? What? Send me the reading list.
I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't send it to the children that have been left behind.
Well, the children who are left behind are the ones who actually put the links where the people can see them.
Okay,
So
true that.
the
Okay.
children who are left behind actually do the tactical work of the show. And
That's
you kind of
true.
need the
Okay,
link.
I'm gonna send Erika the links too, but I'm gonna send y'all a link about Andrew Johnson, about Ronald Reagan, about Woodrow Wilson. And if you don't want to read the links, I'm gonna also put a documentary on there. At least watch the documentary. That's a good compromise.
Let's see if Amber really does these things in
I'm
time
gonna go
for.
do it now.
Okay. Also, your show notes. Don't forget to do that, Amber, because you know we a few days away from the first here. We y'all, it's gonna be the first to y'all. But anyway, this is us producing the show. Y'all getting to see up close and personal what it's like working with
No,
Amber.
this is what y'all are seeing right now is the domestic violence wheel, the power and control wheel. That's what y'all seeing right now. Okay, control.
Y'all, we want to be clear that what we are saying here is not that the fight is lost and that we should just throw our hands up, put them in the air. What we're saying is that racism isn't a fight that we can win by taking financial literacy classes, right? That John Hope Bryant ain't gonna help us to get there. The organized, concerted effort by those who are brazenly stripping away our civil rights provides a template that we can follow if we want to claw our rights back from them. And we cannot gain our liberation with the flawed beliefs that Black capitalism and our individual efforts can change the reality for us and the generations that are to come. History has demonstrated to us that we can't ever stop advancing towards liberation. This ain't a fight that we can win alone. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.